Welcome to the Believe Podcast Network SoCal Sweat. My name is Ann McDaniels, a former NFL cheerleader and product manager turned actress and model who dreams of being a UFC fighter. Meow. Learning strategies to help motivate others leads me to bring you interviews each week from a range of athletes, experts in fitness and nutrition, and so much more. Thanks for listening to Believe, the #1 podcast for working professionals, and let's push our endorphins to higher performance through SoCal Sweat. This is your host, Ann McDaniels, and thank you so much for joining me on another episode of SoCal Sweat. Today we're going to be talking about vitality, what it means to be vital. Well, the word vitality is actually defined as the state of being strong and active, having energy. With the pressures of today's society, so many people seem to lack energy and vitality. Now, my guest today is Dr. Allan Mishra. He's a certified orthopedic surgeon and teaches at Stanford Medical School. Now, Dr. Allan Mishra wants us to stop feeling like we're pushing a rock up a hill. Do you ever just feel like you're doing that, maybe getting nowhere and lacking energy? Well, Dr. Allan recognized that, and he wrote a book called Vitality Essentials, which serves as the foundation for his Stanford course. His message remains so powerful that companies like GSV Ventures, Google, and Apple, and so many more have invited him to speak. His dynamic course and teachings are now available to everybody. So no more pushing that rock up a hill. Learn to be vital, learn to have energy, and he does it with these methods. How to pinpoint your purpose, how to dare greatly, how to think with time in mind, how to spark hope, how to be a terminator and tough, how to consider your sleep a superpower, how to stockpile your health, and finally, how to cultivate closeness. And I'm so happy to introduce today's guest, Dr. Allan Mishra on DareToBeVital. Well, good morning, Dr. Allan Mishra. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I was so happy to discover Dr. Allan on Clubhouse, the new sensation for social media. Now, not only are you an orthopedic surgeon, and by the way, what do you think about the Tiger Woods situation this morning with the tibia, fibula, everything broken?
Yes, no, I think I'm a big golf fan, big Tiger fan, and I wish him and his family the best.
Yeah.
He sounds like he had a pretty devastating injury in terms of the lower extremity fractures. Compound fractures are ones where the bones stick out of the skin. And sounds like he had one of those. I just heard on the radio that he had a rod placed in one of his legs, and then some other pins and screws. Mm-hmm. So I think the good news is I didn't hear anyone say he had any life-threatening injuries. So I think we can be thankful for that, and we wish him the best of luck.
Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood sports background, how you got into medicine?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town called Okemos, Michigan, which is in the center of the state of Lansing. And I grew up loving sports, loved to play basketball, ran on the track team. And then I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad and medical school. Go Blue to all those Wolverines out there. Basketball is doing very well this year. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do other than I knew I wanted to be a doctor really early on. I was fascinated by the human body and fascinated by trying to help people get better. When I was in medical school, though, I really thought I wanted to be a cardiologist and actually did a couple years of cardiovascular research, including some time at Stanford. Wow. And then about 3/4 of the way through medical school, I had a little revelation. I was like, oh no, I don't like sick people. And I'm like, but you're in medical school. What are you going to do? And I was very fortunate to discover orthopedics, which is not really sick people, but injured or people who have specific disorders. And it's one of the very few things in medicine where, as you know, which sounds like you've probably had some surgery yourself, you can try to fix something. So that could be a fracture, that could be a rotator cuff, that could be an ACL tear, things like that. And then specifically sports medicine, I was lucky to, after my orthopedic surgery training, I did a fellowship at Stanford in sports medicine and have been very, very blessed to be in Northern California for a long time.
Had you gotten any injuries during basketball or track that lent to, again, a love of orthopedics?
Yeah, it's a funny story. I forgot to, you were very good at this, obviously. So when I was probably a sophomore, maybe a junior in high school, I ran the 800 meters and I high jumped, and I remember having this terrible pain in my knees. And I went to go see an orthopedic surgeon, and he said, I'm sorry, Allan, you have Osgood-Schlatter's disease. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I have cancer. And it turns out that that's just, when you're growing and your bones are still not fully mature, if you jump too much or run too much, you can get a little tendonitis where the tendon inserts into the bone. And it's named after these two docs, Oshkin and Schlatter. It sounds like a terrible disease,
It does.
it's usually self-limiting. But at the
Right.
time, actually, I still remember that when I see my patients, because he kind of just said that and walked out of the room. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And now when I say something medical to somebody, I try to understand that they're not going to hear the words I say. And this is why I think it's important. And I think why Clubhouse or podcasts are very important is the tone of your voice, the pace of your voice, the ability to even pause and open up time for questions is crucial in what I do as a physician. But I think it's crucial as we try to learn from each other, especially right now.
Putting things all around your place to always be working out, always be physical. And this morning I was watching the news, and it showed how completely parallel your physical and your mental and your memory are. It can prevent Alzheimer's. Constantly be moving. It's the diet and it's the exercise. So like you said, when you get up, there's a dumbbell right there. When you're making your coffee, use your stretching machine. You can always be moving. And you can add those extra calories. And they also did a study on Zooming and how people do not have the ability to get up and walk around. And it's like caged animals. So put it on audio only. So you can be able to walk around and do a yoga pose, do some weightlifting. How did you come up with that? Have you always been doing that? Because I myself do that all the time.
Well, I think somebody might have called me like relentlessly active when I was a kid. I just was running around crazy all the time. But now I turn that into a mantra I call exercise relentlessly. And what I mean by that is exactly those two words, exercise and be relentless about it. And so during COVID, I think there's been an epidemic of inactivity that has accompanied the COVID pandemic. And so as we emerge, hopefully, out of the pandemic, we have a massive exercise deficit. And in that exercise deficit, I think we need to kind of start small. So that's why I put the dumbbell next to my bed. And if I touch my toothbrush at night or in the morning, I try to do a set of curls. If the microwave is turned on, I'll spend, for heating up tea, coffee, oatmeal. In the morning, I'll spend that 2 minutes stretching my hamstrings or stretching my shoulders. And so that gets you 2, 5, 8, 10 minutes more per day. And those little micro habits add up. So those allow me, I've got some pretty tight hamstrings, but if I've been really consistent about stretching when I go to get on a bike or when I go for a hike or go for a run, I've had 2 to 5 minutes every day in addition to what I do either before or after the run. And that pays massive dividends. So this idea of working on your flexibility, your strength, and your endurance So data shows that low-grade exercise, that could be 20-minute walk, is as good as Prozac or Zoloft for mild depression. And when you talk about long-term value of exercising relentlessly, there's clear value for neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's. And the reasons why that, I'll drop a little science in here. This is the one thing that I'm exploring on Clubhouse and other mediums is to say, listen, I want to help people, but I think sometimes we think that as physicians, people can't understand science. And I think that's because we need better translators. So let me try here, and you can tell me whether or not this is meaningful.
I'm a science nerd, though, so I'm going to love it.
Okay. So I hope it applies to men, but it was about 450 women who happened to be twins. And this woman researcher in England was interested in what are the risk factors for dementia in women between 50 and 60. And her primary outcome was just, okay, I'm going to measure their cognitive ability based on a validated scoring system every year. And the number one thing that correlates with dementia between a 50 and 60-year-old is just your increasing age. Each year increases your risk. And I'm not exactly sure why she decided to measure your leg strength as well, but she found, especially at the end of 10 years, that leg strength the stronger your legs were, the less risk of getting dementia. And she also did brain MRIs. So there was actually more gray matter, more white matter. So what this allows me to say to patients and people and on Clubhouse and here is that leg power predicts brain power. So if you want to have a diminished or decreased risk of getting Alzheimer's, you need to get on a bike, you need to walk, you need to hike. And people are a little bit afraid of knee arthritis, which is another reason why you should have strong legs, but they're petrified of dementia. So I think it's a motivating thing. So how did I do in translating that research?
It was great. And I wonder if the leg strength for the women particularly were known for lower body strength. So maybe that was also, and did they measure for osteoporosis on top of that?
They didn't. But there's emerging data to suggest why this actually happens is that if you do that biceps curl, you do that 15-minute walk, you get on the Peloton for 20 minutes, your muscles are actually releasing things like, they're called myokines, myokines. And those are little proteins that help stimulate a variety of things in your body that are good. They help your heart, they help your brain, they help your muscles, everything. So you can think of your muscles, and this is what I do partially with DareToBeVital.com in terms of trying to teach people how to be more vital. As an orthopedic surgeon, I try to restore their function. And in my sort of alternative universe, which has sort of merged together in DareToBeVital, I think it's impossible to be vital if you're idle. So I say you can't be vital by being idle. So I've learned that we as humans are attracted to these little aphorisms. We remember them. So when I say leg power predicts brain power, and I tell you the story of that research, I could quote you all the p-values and all the numbers and the journals, but that's going to be less effective at you hopefully motivating, not maybe you, but your audience or other people to get moving.
With a lot of your patients, I'm sure you see a lot of athletic injuries and things like that, but you must see a lot of highly overweight patients that brought you to this movement. And how do you deal with that? There's a lot of, there's excuses, every excuse in the book, and we know it. We know it a mile away. How do you counsel them? Because it's just, it's a train wreck in front of you, but you can't really, there's only so much you can say. What are some of the key elements that you tell these patients?
So that's a really good question. And so it's very difficult in the medical arena to do that. And so maybe you're talking to Allan, the guy who works at DareToBeVital, versus Dr. Allan, the guy who works in the clinic. I do know and talk to my patients about their diet, weight, sleep, and exercise because they're all connected. But let me talk to you a little bit about it. Let's say you were one of my students and you were saying, yes, the same question as opposed to one of my patients, because it's a little different. And so here's a question I would have maybe as a patient. Do you want to be treated well or do you want to be treated optimally? And you would say?
Yeah, optimally, please.
Okay. So this is a game. Okay. But I then say, okay, well, my job is always to treat you well. That's what, I can only do my best to treat you well. In order to treat you optimally, you need to take ownership over your decisions, choices, and your vitality. And then they kind of tilt their head like, did he just say that? And I said, yeah. So 60 to 70% of your health and wellness has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do with your genetics. It has to do with your behavior and your environment. And that's a difficult conversation in the office because I get 15 or 20 minutes to try and convince people. But I try to get them to understand why they're going to do what I suggest to do. Because if you can't understand the why, it doesn't matter what the how is. So what I teach in my classes, and I'm actually teaching it again in April, this classic through Stanford Continuing Studies called Vitality Essentials. It actually just opened for enrollment yesterday. Space is limited. Check it out on DareToBeVital.com.
Absolutely.
But I really push the students in a way I don't push my patients, because I feel like I can be a little more paternalistic with them. And I'll say things like, you need to live at your ideal weight. No matter what else you do, if you don't live at your ideal weight, you're going to be swimming uphill. The other things I suggest is that you just be more aware of your choices. I think the reason why there's 1,000 diets out there is that, they all sort of work and they all sort of don't work. And I think you need to find a match for you. What's worked for me, and I also just try to share a lot about myself, is I don't like to be on a diet. But what changed for me, especially last year during COVID, is I just learned to be aware of what I was eating. Okay. Am I really hungry? Do I really need that second slice of pizza? Do I really need that second glass of wine? And more often than not, if you just don't punish yourself with, beating yourself up, you can't do this, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, as opposed to just saying, am I bored? Is that why I'm eating? Am I depressed? Is that why I'm eating? Am I going along with the flow? Water's crucial. And I think the thesis I have with Dare to Be Vital is that vitality is a skill. And so there is a crossover into what I do in my day job, but I feel like a vitality coach or ambassador and the work I do outside of being a physician. And I can be a little more specific as opposed to a patient who comes to see me with a problem. That's my job to fix it.
Excellent. Well, you really put these in layman's terms. Now, you talk about the 4 interactive pillars of being vital. And can you also just please tell the audience, what does it mean, Dare to Be Vital? What does vital actually mean? Just vitality, zest for life? How do you define that?
So it's a good question. I struggled with that for a couple of years. You have lots of good questions. And my working definition of vitality is this: vitality is purposeful, vigorous, and connected living. Vitality is purposeful, vigorous, and connected living. And each one of those words is obviously very carefully chosen. So I do think your purpose is the foundation of your vitality. And too often we kind of don't think about what our purpose should be. It's a very difficult concept. So we let other people define our purpose, or we just kind of go through life not thinking what our purpose should be. But that's where I start in my classes, is try to help people pinpoint their peak purpose. Vigorous gets to the, exercising relentlessly, but also vigorous in your attitude. So you mentioned excuses and things like that. When it comes to either weight or exercise, maybe you're eating too much, you're not exercising enough. One of the exercises I have in my class is, okay, give me all of them. Give me 5, give me 10, write them all down. Okay. But I want 2 columns. The first column is every excuse you can think of. I'm busy, I don't feel well, I've got a lot of family responsibilities, I don't have enough money. It used to be the commute. The commute is a little less now because there's maybe no commute. And that's side one. And that's the excuse side. The second side is, if you think of those excuses as barriers, what are you going to do to get in, around, or through that barrier? Okay. And most often we complain, and actually I've been surprised in the surveys I've done of either my corporate clients or my students, the number one thing people I thought would be, oh my God, he teaches me how to connect with my purpose or my vitality. I think it's actually time. So we all are given the same amount of time, but what I say is be ruthless about how you spend your time. And so that's a function of what your purpose is. And we are all wasting 15 to 30 minutes a day. And I've been in the Silicon Valley for 25 years now. Everybody's busy, just ask them, but they're doing something with their time that may or may not be ideal. So if you start to act ruthlessly with your time, you're going to find that something is not right. And there's something you're going to be able to cross up that list of things you're doing. And then you can put that into working on exercise or being more mindful about how you eat.
That's great. So you can be ruthless with your time and exercise relentlessly, even if you only have 45 minutes, and you can break it up in 3 15-minute increments. There's
Yes.
always a way. On the legs, I'm very interested in the leg power is brain power. If you are moving and you're lifting weights with your arms and you're doing a lot of cardio with your arms and does it actually perpetuate to the whole body? Even if
Yes.
you can't use it, it does. Okay. So
Yeah, no, so it's still emerging.
Okay.
And I try to be super scientific as opposed to anecdotal about what I'm saying, but it looks like vigorous aerobic training or HIIT training may be really good for you, but any sort of muscle contraction, that could be the bicep curls, that could be other upper extremity, workout activity, maybe even an exercise bike. They have upper extremity bikes. I don't know if you've seen those. That's going to help stimulate your muscle and release those really good proteins and what we call cytokines that will stimulate things way beyond where you are. So it's just, I think we were meant to move, and we've kind of gotten in a situation, especially in this last year, where we're sitting too much, we're not moving around, we're told to stay indoors, And all this stuff has not been good for us. And there's some value to it apparently, but not definitively for mitigating the pandemic. But there's very little evidence out there that being outside and taking a walk is bad for you. So that's part of this, what I call #MoveNow thing that I've been trying to do. And by the way, I committed to doing it 28 days in a row and posting something on my DareToBeVital Instagram. And I thought that would be easy, but for those of you who are Instagram experts, I'm not. And coming up with like a 60-second video every day of what I'm doing, I should videotape this. I'm talking to you about moving. That should be my post for today.
There you go.
It gets to be challenging to come up with something that people might want to interact with. But the whole point is not to, become an Instagram influencer. It's to try to motivate people to literally move now. Take a lap around your dining room table, go up and down the stairs if you can. Just get moving because it's really, really good for you.
Now, back to your Dare to Be Vital. You talk about the 4 interactive pillars, which are physical, mental, social, and spiritual. And all of these things lend to finding your peak purpose in life, stockpiling your health, and think with time in mind. This is very well organized. What do you see are the biggest barriers in a commonality? Is it the physical, the mental, the social, or the spiritual?
I think each of us has strengths and each of us has weaknesses.
Yeah.
And so I think some of us can be incredibly physically strong, but maybe spiritually weak. And spirituality, for me personally, is a belief in God, and I am a Christian, but I think it's also just a belief in something bigger than yourself. Mm-hmm. So if you're all about you only, then you're never going to be as vital as possible. And it's such a difficult concept that I still struggle with, even though I know and I really love to do this. But serving somebody else in need is one of the best ways if you're stuck. So all of us, every single one of us has some problem or issue or concern that we're struggling with. And if we just get out of our own way one way or another, I call it the #DareToBeVital challenge. Use your unique talents and enthusiasm, to transform yourself, your community, and the world. So use your unique talents and enthusiasm to transform yourself, your community, and the world. Now, when I do this in a class, which I'll be doing, I do it all the time now, I just say, listen, what are you good at? Are you a good listener? Are you a good organizer? Are you a good cook? Are you a good cleaner? I mean, like, I'm a terrible cook, but I can clean really well. So that's a bargain. Like, you want to cook something for me, I'll clean all day and twice on Tuesday. But each of us knows what we have a talent for. And also we know what our weaknesses are, but lean into using whatever your talents to help somebody who doesn't have that. That leads me to maybe a secondary thought here. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to say, is that each of us has been through stuff, whether it's the accident, injury, family issues or concerns. And it's sort of a new idea that is counterintuitive, but I call it your weakness is the way. And people go, well, what are you talking about? I go, well, maybe, something happened to you as a kid that you don't really want to talk about. Something happened to you at work that you don't want to talk about. You have a real serious issue or concern. If you're more open about that, then you're more likely to be able to help somebody else. And that might have happened to you for a reason. And then and I was actually called out by my pastor when I gave a talk at Google to do something. So first of all, he's like, oh, you're the vitality guy. I nominated you to give a talk at Google about your vitality. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And so I practiced with him, and he said, not good. And I'm like, this is 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago now. It's like, what's wrong? And he goes, oh, no, you're giving your doctor speech. And so he called me out to tell my story of how and why I was a Christian at Google in Silicon Valley. Right?
Ooh, was that controversial?
It was hard. It was very hard to put it all together, but it was insanely well received. Okay.
Especially in Silicon Valley, because
100%. Right. So what became one of the challenging things for me to share, and it's not that I don't want to share it, I just don't feel as comfortable sometimes as I should. And then people came up to me afterwards and like, oh my God, thank you so much. And it was literally on the Google campus in one of their auditoriums. And And it's allowed me to be more open about it. And I think people are screaming for spirituality. I'm not saying people have to follow what I do, but people are screaming to be part of something bigger than themselves right now.
Especially now, I can't imagine people that didn't grow up with some kind of faith with the pandemic and all of the resources in our economy. There is no hope, and you see the suicides go up. And it's like, even if you get depressed, we know as Christians or whatever someone is, there is a higher faith, and we know that there's something better, and we're striving to be something. And that's just really interesting that you were able to speak on that, and they didn't say anything, but that just goes to show how open-minded Google is. And I love that your pastor sort of said, this is what it should be.
Oh no, he totally called me out.
Very forward thinking, but kind of, yeah, that could have been bad. I'm really glad that went well. It's very interesting to me. This class, Dare to Be Vital, it can be for anybody, because originally I thought, is it just for medical students? Is it just for students at Stanford? But it is an online program. Is it private coaching as well?
So Dare to Be Vital is something that I organize a few things under. One, you're alluding to this course. It's called Vitality Essentials. It's done through Stanford Continuing Studies. I've now been doing it for several years. It used to be just on the Stanford campus, which is really cool. But it went virtual last year. And because it went virtual, and because it's through Stanford Continuing Studies, anybody can sign up for it. Again, I think it just opened yesterday. But we keep it to a very small number of people. And so you can find a link on DareToBeVital.com. The other part of what I do with Dare to Be Vital is not so much individual coaching, but I work with companies and how to enhance the vitality of their teams. And the endpoint is weird because a lot of corporate organizations are focused on wellness. And I'm a little allergic to that term because I don't want to just be well, I want to be vital. And so just by changing the endpoint from vitality to wellness allows me to be a little more, as I suggested earlier in our conversation, to be a little more, to push people a little harder. Like, I don't want you to be well. I want you to be vital. And if you're going to be vital, and by the way, who doesn't want to be vital? I haven't found anybody who's against vitality yet.
Right.
So I don't want to, maybe somebody doesn't want to be vital, but you've got to do something for yourself. And then what I've tried to do, and I've been at this for close to 5 years now, is I've done a lot of the homework. I've done a lot of the medical and other research into this. And what I've reduced it to are what I call vetted vitality info snacks. So we live in these 60 seconds or less. So I've got to be able to tell somebody, okay, think with time in mind, think what your peak purpose, consider sleep a superpower. These are all reduced into the Vitality Essentials course book, which is up on Amazon. And it grew out of a book that I wrote. I wrote about a 400-page book. And then somebody about a year ago said to me, nobody's going to read your 400-page book. Why don't you just turn it into a 100-page course book? So it's more like a workbook on your vitality. But that's what we use. That's the required textbook for the class, but that's also available for anybody.
Is it ebook as well?
I'm sorry?
Is it electronic as well?
Yeah. No, it's on Kindle as well. I haven't put it up on Apple yet, but it's on Kindle as well. And as you can tell, I'm passionate about it. And that's actually back to where Clubhouse comes in. Is Clubhouse has been, I just discovered it a few weeks ago, but it's basically a worldwide radio potential audience or sort of a town hall. And already in the few weeks that I've been on there, I've met so many amazing people like yourself and connected with people from all over the world. And because people are forced to use their voice, and that may be disclaimer, I did have my own radio DJ show when I was in college.
I was going to say, yeah, you're pretty good. You're pretty good.
If I could be like the Chainsmokers and get paid big money to spin records, I would do it. But that wasn't available back then. So we're having better conversations because people aren't just typing in 144 characters, some nasty comment. I want to learn more about your perspective. I want you to understand my perspective. And there is so much information that's translated in your voice, but without having to get Zoom fatigue. So you can be taking a walk or you can be folding the laundry or whatever while you're listening in. And I've become a massive, Clubhouse fan. So I appreciate that.
Me too. And I also love that it's not about the looks. And there's so many people that just rely on that only. And I work as a model full-time in acting and modeling. And I always tell people, because there's a lot of people I work with, it's like they only lead with their looks. And it's like that can fade. You can get in a car accident. You've got to have a heart, a brain, and empathy. You've got to be curious. Like I'm certainly not ripping on people, but I seem to more often than not run into that. And I love the fact that Clubhouse is intellectual. It's debating. And last night I was on at 3 a.m, just heard a huge argument. And there's a lot of battles going on lately, but you know what? Battle it out. It's a good discussion. So all the social media will be on DareToBeVital. You also have the website, DareToBeVital.com, and then the hashtag DareToBeVital. Before I let you go, because I know we have to moderate Clubhouse, I would love to just ask you, what has been your favorite, if you can call it, a cheat food during the pandemic? Has there been a recurring treat where you're like, oh, I know I shouldn't have it, but I have to do it? It's mostly been Reese's peanut butter cups I've found, and macaroni and cheese, popcorn and chips. Those have been the most popular. Now, how about you?
All right. Now, I don't quite look like it, but I'm half Asian Indian. And so I discovered this awesome Indian Pakistani takeout restaurant in Palo Alto. And just last night, binged a little bit too much tikka masala. And just, it's impossible to eat good Indian food without carbs. So that's my cheat. But I've also do intermittent fasting, and so it's almost 12:30, and so since 8 o'clock last night, I've had just a little coffee and tea. But the Indian food takeout, and it's relatively inexpensive but ridiculously good. So that's my cheat. Not quite once a week. I've been trying to do it maybe twice a month, but that's my cheat.
What are some goals, and how can we support you besides going to the website and everything else? What are some goals that you are looking forward to?
Well, you've already done it. So this is one of my goals for this year, is to connect with like-minded individuals who want to help other people. So if you're interested, you can find me on Instagram at DareToBeVital. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on Clubhouse at Allan Mishra. I'm probably going to use Clubhouse most because I really enjoy that format, and I've never quite cracked the code on the other social media platforms. And I guess the other thing I'd call out if people are listening is to try to use social media for good. I think there's so many good people out there, and just the final thing I'd ask people to think about is to take that Dare to Be Vital challenge, to use your unique talents and enthusiasm to transform yourself, your community, and the world. Because if we had a whole bunch more vital people out there, think how great the world would be.
Absolutely. And there are, like you said, so many good people. Well, thank you. I look forward to working with you again on Clubhouse. You did a wonderful job, and I hope you can get another tikka masala sometime this week. Thank you so very much.
All right, you're so welcome.
And again, Dare to Be Vital, Dr. Allan Mishra. It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that was Dr. Allan Mishra on Dare to Be Vital. With his 4 interactive pillars of physical, mental, social, and spiritual, he wants you to lead a vital life, full of purpose and vigorous connected living. And you can find all of his links and social media and the podcast notes below. We appreciate you for listening, and please subscribe and rate the show on iTunes. You can also listen on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Luminary, Tuned In, or at Believe.com. You can certainly reach out to me for any questions or topics you'd like covered on the show at Ann McDaniels. And I'll see you next time on So